Eduardo Placer. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous. Thank you. It's so good to have you here. I met Eduardo within the past few months when I identified the community I wanted to serve and underrepresented people. I started asking around who I should know, who's already out there paving the way and doing amazing things. And immediately Eduardo's name came up.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll receive it.
There it is. The sense I got of him as he was being described to me was this bright light doing inspirational work around the world. And as I looked into it more, I realized that included, but wasn't limited to, bringing together diverse communities, and immediately felt drawn to reach out to him.
Aww.
And in his wonderfulness, he immediately reached back out and said, I'd be happy to meet. We discovered that we also went to the same college.
Go Quakers. Yes.
Woohoo! The mighty Quakers.
Yes.
We went at similar times, but he is younger than I am by a few years.
Oh, look at you outing yourself. I love it.
Oh, all over the place, truthfully. You do so much cool stuff. You describe yourself as a story doula and international public speaking coach, which apparently I could use some help with. And you're a professional actor turned founder of Fearless Communicators, keynote speaker, MC, global facilitator. I'll turn it over to you to talk more about it.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. For the people who are new to meeting me, my name is Eduardo Placer. I use he, him pronouns. I also identify as being the proud child and grandchild of refugees and immigrants. My family fled Spain because of Franco, Cuba because of Castro. So native Spanish speaker, both bilingual and bicultural, and cisgender, gay, queer man. Important, I think, to just set that as a context so people know the point of view of my lived experience. Also, since we're inning and outing ourselves, 47, I think it's also interesting just from a narrative as a gay, and now I also identify as queer, which is not necessarily something that I would have used to identify myself when I came out in 1995, before Will and Grace, before Ellen. As we continue to locate ourselves and find ourselves and anchor ourselves in this brave new world and this brave time that we happen to be inhabiting it.
And that's interesting too, that you wouldn't have used that terminology initially.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that I love, one, about language. And I was an English major, so I went to Penn like you, majored in English. And it's interesting. You would think that maybe as an Ivy League English major, you could be a little puritanical about language and grammar. But what we learn, and also as a stage actor who also performed Shakespeare, is that Shakespeare invented words all the time. Language is not in a museum. It is a living, breathing experience of our humanity. And we continue to navigate greater and greater complexity about who we are as we continue to learn and grow and evolve as a species. I think that the LGBTQ community is on the front line of reimagining and redefining language. And for that, it's important to honor and name our non-binary and our gender expansive and trans community members who really are on the front lines of really challenging traditional norms, specifically how they exist in language. Like, I'll give you a quick example. As someone who identifies as Latino, but also Hispanic, there's a politic around one or the other. And the term Latinx was something that was empowered because Spanish is inherently a gendered language, and the masculine encompasses the feminine and everything else. So the plural for people who have shared Latinidad is Latino, which means that the masculine, again, embraces everything else. So for women and people who don't identify as men or masculine are like, why does that happen? Why does a man have to be what encompasses us all? So that's where the Latinx conversation emerged. A lot of resistance to Latinx because that felt like a political thing that was almost imposed upon the community. But the thing that's now emerging out of Latinx is Latine. So there's Latino, Latina, Latine. And the ne is now a plural that is not masculine or feminine.
Wow.
So I think that there's an interesting aliveness to it. And I think it's really thrilling. I think it's really fun and playful. And I'm here for it.
Oh, yes, me too. And I just learned a whole lot. And language is so important and powerful. And as I'm having these conversations, learning about language and how important it is to people to find the right language that feels right in their bodies and that feels right for who they just are. And then in some ways I find the language limiting around it. What do I call underrepresented, minority?
Marginalized.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I think a lot of our conversation is going to be delving on story because that's part of why we're here. But I'll share a quick story. So I run a public speaking coaching business. It's called Fearless Communicators. I believe traditional public speaking is taught as an intellectual exercise, not as a physical, spiritual, and emotional exercise. So the body will oftentimes betray the speaker because they've been thinking their thinks, but they don't know how to build a bridge from their brain to their body. Yeah. So myself and my entire team, as you mentioned before, are stage actors. So we have actually built that bridge. So we are trained to be embodied communicators. We are now doing the 30th program in September.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Where we work with individuals on crafting like a signature talk, like a 12 to 15 minute talk in 6 days. It's like getting shot out of a cannon.
Oh, wow.
And we've done it in New York, San Francisco, Tel Aviv, 3 cities in Australia. We did it virtually during the pandemic. We are now happy to be home in New York City and people are coming to us to do the program. But when we were running it in Australia, I think this was in 2018, I had received an email from a straight white cisgender man in my network, and I noticed that he had his pronoun designations. And I was like, wait a second, here's a straight white cis man putting his pronouns. I'm a queer, really in the conversation person. Why aren't my pronouns on my email signature and all over the place? I then added my pronouns to my email signature. And one of my clients in Australia, her partner, saw the pronoun designations and was like, what is that? And realized in that moment, they finally saw that they don't identify as a woman, they identify as non-binary.
Wow.
So that simple act of someone with immense privilege, a straight white cis man saying, I have nothing to lose, I'm going to put the pronouns, inspired a gay cis man to put his pronouns on his thing that had someone halfway across the world finally find language that had them see themselves. And I think that is, again, speaking about the power of language, micro acts that have macro consequences.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I love that. That's a great story. Tell us anything you want us to know about personally interest, something maybe people don't know about you.
So I thrive with a self-diagnosed acute condition that I call showtune-itis, where I burst out into show tunes at the drop of a hat. The story that I share around that happened in kindergarten at Pinewood Acres Elementary School in Miami, Florida. And there was this game, we called it the Battle of the Kissing Girls. And what happened is that the girls would chase after the boys and the boys would run for their lives. But this one day, the most popular boy, Brett MacGyver, did the unthinkable. And he actually kissed Brooke Tinsley, who was the leader of the Kissing Girls. Ooh. And then I screamed at the top of my lungs that they were going to get married. And then I led a parade through the playground with a little song like, Brooke and Brett are getting married. Brooke and Brett are getting married. Brooke and Brett are getting married. And it was like Cirque du Soleil, before Cirque du Soleil in 1983, where there was like flipping and it was like the Music Man. I was like leading a parade through the playground and everybody was marching behind me. And then the alarm went off and I was like, what just happened? And in The Tempest, there's a beautiful line was, what brave new world is this? And I felt like there was this emergence of this world where men, boys, erupted in song and dance and that it was okay and that it was safe and that it was magical. I think I was always naturally attracted to musical theater. I have a grandmother and a great-grandmother who had fled against Spain because of Franco, Cuba because of Castro, who were huge opera, ballet, theater. I just saw a clip of Joan Rivers and they asked her, tell us about your grandson. How old is he? Oh, he's 10. What are his interests? Like, he really wants to be a professional football player. That's all he talks about. And then the host says, Joan, do you have any wish for your grandson? And she said, yes, I want him to be gay. And then she was, I need the fact that I knew Judy Garland to have street cred. And I was like, that's who I was with my grandmother and my great-grandmother. I mean, not that they met Judy Garland. They would go to opening night at the Metropolitan Opera House in 1938 and 1939 and Fur on opening night. And I was like, oh my God, my queer heart was just like bursting. Opening night on Broadway, you know, with the Barrymores and getting their autographs. And I was like, oh my God, like I was in heaven. So that curiosity, that almost cinematic imagination, I think was also a respite. And there were many ways that I was very happy as a child. So I think that there is nuance. Not everything is black and white. I was loved and cared for. And my parents had no idea how to support and raise a queer child.
Sure.
Not to mention that I also have an identical twin brother who's straight.
Oh.
I say when we used to play with our G.I. Joes, my twin brother played War and I played War, the musical. My little toys sang and they danced and they had monologues. And on the soccer field, my brother played like forward and sweeper and center and goalie. And I was just, whatever position they put me, I was bored to tears. And I would collect little rocks and I would name them after the Von Trapp children. So I was like, and this little rock is Friedrich, and this little rock is Liesel, and this one's Brigida. It looks like a duck, talks like a duck, acts like a duck, walks like a duck. It's a duck. So I think some of my challenges growing up as a child were that I feel like there was a part of me. Now, I believe that male homophobia is another form of misogyny. I wasn't gay. I was girly. I was feminine. Eventually, yes, I developed a sexual attraction that was towards men, that was like then homosexual behavior. But as a child, I didn't have that. I did have attraction to boys and crushes on boys. But to be honest, like I had some crushes and little things around girls too. It was a little open.
Yeah.
But then as I matured, the desire became far more pronounced, or 100% pronounced. I am a Kinsey 6 gay. Not bi. I'm a gay man. The thing that's interesting about it is that what needed to be fixed or corrected, being in a Cuban machista culture, was my girliness, my femininity, which also included my tastes. It was the musical theater. It was the love of beauty pageants. It was the Tony Awards. It was wanting to twirl batons. With a twin brother who played football and baseball and all the other things. And again, that's gendered, but that's what my parents had. And they were like, we need to shift this to make you look and sound a little bit more like your brother. And I think that's why being an actor is something that I aspired to, because I was performing from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to sleep.
Yep.
And it was all about trying to convince people that I was worthy of being loved. I think the core wound is that I was inherently unlovable. There was something inherently wrong with me, and I needed to perform and achieve in order to make what would eventually be my queerness or my gayness palatable. So I remember my father once said, Barney Frank is so smart, obviously so accomplished, and he's gay. So that I had to be extraordinary, because the moment that somebody found out that I was gay, I would go from A+ to maybe B- or C+. Overreach, because if I was C+ and then gay, then I was like failing.
Yeah.
So I had to compensate for this inherent belief that I had that who I was a disappointment. A lot of people who are LGBTQ+ in the various ways probably identify with that over-indexing on performance, achievement, to make ourselves worthy, lovable. I hate the word accepted. I resist the word accepted, but that's like a core piece of it too, that we belong. Right?
Yeah. Wow. So interesting. And there's something about the fact that you're a twin that feels like it makes it even more pronounced, because there's this side-by-side comparison thing.
Yeah. My father would wake us up in the morning on Saturday mornings with Here Comes the Sun, the Beatles song. And then he would say, it's the call of the gridiron. And he would get all the neighborhood boys who were playing football initially in the street. He was like, you're going to get hit by a car. And so he bought cones and he would take us to the park. And then we would play 3-on-3 or 4-on-4 football. And he would play quarterback for both sides. And he would teach people how to run like posts and flags and down, out, and ups and hook ins and hook lefts and all this other stuff. I could care less. And I hated it. I hated it. And I know one should be grateful for the time. It's an amazing gift that one has a father who would spend a Saturday morning and also get the neighborhood kids involved. None of those other kids' fathers did that. And I would always get the same play, which was 3 steps and turn around. So I would do one, but I would turn it into jazz runs. So I would like the jazz, a hit. My father was like, you'd run the play, but then you got to find yourself free so that they can throw you the ball. Meanwhile, my brother was like a celebrity. Like my brother was like doing amazing things. And I was like, oh, this is a great time to practice my cartwheels. Like my one hand, I can do cartwheels on both sides. Like I'm ambidextrous on my cartwheels. So I can do the one-handed on both sides. I can do the double on both sides. I was like, I'm Nadia Comaneci.
That's great. I can see it.
What's interesting too is that now like I can laugh about it. And now I think people see my energy and they see this authenticity and this joy. But what I have to remind people is that joy and that authenticity didn't come easy. That is sourced from deep pain.
Yeah.
And that pride and that joy and that authenticity is medicine. It is healing all of those wounds where I had a deep belief that the truth of who I was unsafe.
Right.
In the places where you're supposed to feel the most safe, your home, in your school, in your church, there's no safety. And you know it inherently. And the other thing that I think is important is just the trauma of being a liar.
Yes.
We carry this trauma, which is that I was lying from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to sleep. I was raised Catholic. 10 commandments, thou shalt not tell a lie. I'm also lying because I also know that is survival.
Yeah.
I can't tell the truth. And I want to add that the ability to hide comes with great privilege. Like I said before, right? So if someone is a cisgender gay man, let's say Pete Buttigieg, for an example, there's a reason why he's really palatable as a gay man. And that is because he performs straight white male cisgender power.
Right.
Now, if he had a swish and he was a hairdresser and he loved RuPaul's Drag Race, I guarantee you he would not be Secretary of Transportation, no matter what his Rhodes Scholar situation would be like, no matter what his Harvard degree would look like. And that's about femininity. That has nothing to do with gayness, being gay.
Yes.
So I think that in gay male culture, I can speak about myself as a gay man. What we have is this cult of masculinity, which is I'm not girly or I'm not femme, because being femme is being less than. It is seen as weak. It is not seen as attractive. But that is our own internalized homophobia and misogyny that we are now imposing into our community.
Right.
Right. So for women, cis women who are lesbian, who can perform femininity, right, or are ambiguous, where people are not assuming their gayness or their queerness or their biness or their gender expansiveness or whatever, that can also be an immense privilege. But there are some people who can't. And for me as a child growing up, I couldn't hide it. I was swishing and beauty pageanting and singing. So the bullying, right, I couldn't hide. I tried, no matter how hard I tried, there was always like a comment or we think he's a little, so I didn't have the privilege of hiding. There are people who need to hide it for survival, and that's not a judgment, right? There are people who live in parts of the world or even part of this country where you might as well be in some of the worst countries for LGBTQ people, and there are communities in this country that are just as bad, right? So just because we live in the United States doesn't mean we have a golden ticket. You can be in, some rural communities, even in some urban spaces where it is just as dangerous to be queer. And I think that is something that we have to navigate also, I think with grace and curiosity and compassion. I think in this moment, this is why I think it's so important for us to stand in solidarity with our gender expansive, our trans, our non-binary human beings that are members of our community, because they're really on the front line. The cisgender queer community, the bis, the lesbians, the gay men, we have reached a seat at the table, which means we have reached a place of privilege. We have not reached equity. As long as there are other people in our community that are on the back, it is my job, I believe, to use my privilege to continue to make room for other people to show up.
That's great. That's so well said. So I know you have a story you want to share. And I believe it starts with Sammy the Seal.
Yes, second grade.
Yeah. So I'll just let you take it away.
So it was second grade, show and tell at Pinewood Acres Elementary School. And I am ready. And Mrs. Fox looks at me and says, "It's your turn." And I say, "Great." And I grab my little stuffed animal seal and I march to the front of the class. And I say something magical like, "Seals are mammals. They live in the water. They eat fish. Sometimes they're eaten by sharks." And in my mind, I'm like, if there's a Tony Award for best second grade performance of a show and tell, clearly I am the winner. And nobody's interested. My classmates are like bored to tears. And then, like in a moment of like despair to grab their attention, I then say, "I named him after someone in this class." Now, the name of the seal is Sammy the Seal. That's what I named the seal because that's what you call a seal. But then what I choose to say is I named him after Brett MacGyver, who was the blonde popular boy that I had a crush on in second grade in Miami, Florida in 1986. And it's the first time that I taste terror in my mouth. So now, as I run a business around public speaking, one of the things I oftentimes talk about is anchor storytelling. Right? There's oftentimes in the formative years of our lives, there's something that happens that it's the core of why we end up doing the work that we do. And I think about that moment in second grade when I spoke the truth and the room couldn't be with it. It was a moment of risk. It was a testing moment and I failed the test. The room failed me. The teacher failed me. Everybody failed me. All of a sudden, like whatever I said was weird. We don't know what to make of that. It shut me down. There's a well-known statistic, which is that 76% of people suffer from speech anxiety. I believe everybody else lies. And at the root of it, there's a moment where I think we stood in front of people, and it doesn't have to be about gayness. It could be because somebody was heavy or it could be somebody's accent, or it could be somebody had some difference that people picked on or bullied, or someone. I have a client of mine, she was in middle school and she answered a question in class and the teacher said, "That's the stupidest thing that I've heard. Are you autistic?"
Oh,
And
how does
I
that
mean,
happen?
you internalize that. It
Mm-hmm.
took her being in her 30s in a master's program at Columbia University to say, "I'm smart." She was healing from this like 7th grade wound of some bully teacher who shut her down.
Yeah. And someone who was witnessing that, who may have been comfortable up until that point to speak up, done.
Sometimes the event can be so traumatic, people don't remember it. But and some people, the trauma is so present that they never speak up. So like the fear of being shut down is so severe because they weren't even allowed to speak. They don't even have an experience of having a voice, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So you go from Sammy the Seal, and then just from our conversations, I remember you came out in college. Is that correct?
I can correct, my freshman year of college. And I know we're close in age, but I'm a little younger than you. So the world was shifting. So I say that I cusp as a gay man coming out in 1995, the presence and the trauma of HIV and AIDS is something that obviously carried and informed the 1980s and the early 90s. By the time I came out, people were no longer dying of AIDS. That had shifted, that people were living. They had the cocktail, they had AZT. There were people who were living with HIV, not this dying of AIDS thing, which was like being gay is a death sentence. So coming out at 18, there was already a shift. Again, I'm 2 to 3 years away from then Ellen coming out and Will and Grace in 1998, 1999, Rosie O'Donnell. But even in my singing group, I was in the Penn Glee Club. The being gay was a very quiet piece of it. I think when I came out, and people were coming out senior year, people weren't coming out as freshmen. I started the coming out as a freshman. There was a small group of us that came out as freshmen. And then over time, sophomore year, junior year, senior year, more people started coming out. And I don't know if I share this with you, but at Penn, they now have a really beautiful LGBTQ center. But before, there's a main artery, which is Locust Walk, which is the main kind of campus walkway. And the LGBT center used to be on that walk. And there was a gay flag that hung on Locust Walk. And I remember my freshman, sophomore, even junior year, I would walk, but I would never look up at the flag because I thought that if people saw me looking at the flag, they would know that I was gay.
Wow. Wow. So you were out, but still had that fear on a broader sense.
Of course. I think the thing about coming out is one is always coming out. It's not, and then the door's open, here we go. So I think for people who are not members of the LGBTQ community, they think, oh, you come out and that's it. But there are phases to it. There's one, you come out to yourself, which is I'm gay, which you may have been in behavior and you may have been in whatever. I never had any intimacy with a man before I came out. So my coming out process was completely and totally intellectual. So in some ways, I think lucky for me, for a lot of gay men, there's a lot of explorations that kind of is part of the formative years. I didn't have any of that. So for me, it was an intellectual exercise. I was talking to a friend of mine from high school who was in the act of coming out to me. And I was like, you don't have to explain yourself to me. And then I said, I'm bisexual. And then he looked at me and I was like, all right, I'm gay. Like 20 seconds. And then, so there's one coming out to yourself. And then you start coming out to people that you know and trust. And inevitably, when I would come out, people would say, oh, I'm not surprised. And then I was pissed. I was angry. I was like, what do you mean you're not surprised? Because I've been trying to convince everybody else that I was straight. I thought I was putting on this really great show. People were like, looks like a duck, acts like a duck, walks like a duck. It's a duck. Then you come out to your family. And then what's interesting for me is that the story now, something that you hold so privately and close, now is everybody's word and news. So now people are talking about it. Oh, Eduardo's my gay friend, or Eduardo my gay friend, or I have a friend who's gay. And you're like, who gave you permission to out me to random people? But that's because there was a core shame
still,
about it, right? So I shared an article or a reflection on my first Pride parade. When I came out, one of the first people that I came out to was my godfather, who was a gay man, and his then partner, now husband. And two things. One, when I came out to them, they said, congratulations. which I think is the best and most affirming thing anyone can say whenever anyone comes out to you, however they come out to you. The thing to say is congratulations, not to say, I accept you. Fuck your acceptance. The acceptance is not needed nor warranted, not necessary. Like it has nothing to do with your acceptance or your tolerance. Who cares? So the first thing is they said congratulations, which was amazing. And then I went into this diatribe, which was like, I'll never go to a pride parade. I don't know why people have to prance and dance. I don't know why they're drag queens. I don't know. But all of that was the taping of homophobic language that was ingrained in me growing up Cuban in Miami, Florida. I remember my first pride parade, which was probably like in 1997, 1998. So it took me a couple of years. I was probably wearing like a tank top and short shorts and little pride beads and little rings or whatever, and very mid 90s. And I remember there were two groups. One was the gay marching band. And there was this queer African-American human being. I don't know how they would identify at the time. They probably identified as a gay man at the time, but who knows how they would identify today, because we have far more language for it now. But they were dressed in this baby blue jumper, thin as a rail. And that queen pranced down Fifth Avenue, twirling that baton like no one I have ever seen in my entire life. And that baton went higher and she kicked higher and there were splits. And I was just like unapologetically thriving. That joy, that liberation, that unabashed and revolutionary femininity that queen had prancing down Fifth Avenue. I was like, that was liberation. And then also there was a flag twirling group, and the flag twirling group in New York is called the Flagettes. And I think that's the best name ever. So it's a flag group and you're like twirling your flag, down Fifth Avenue. And I think that just also shows our wit. Then we have to laugh because it is a tool to survive. And I think that a lot of people from historically marginalized communities, I think that what we do is we operate in systems that are not built and designed for us. And as outsiders, we play multiple hats. We have to understand how to perform and role play in those systems in order to survive and thrive. But then we also are able to reflect and stand outside of it so we can almost comment on it. And that's in some ways where our wit and our sense of humor and our flair comes from, or shade, because we can also be outside of it and comment on it.
So thinking about your story, starting with Sammy the Seal, going through to coming out at Penn, just take us through to how that leads you to the career that you have now, to the profession that you've chosen.
Yeah. So the first step was being a professional stage actor. So I was a stage actor for 15 years, which was all about playing a role. I did train at one of the top conservatories in the US, where I developed a technique as a stage actor. And that was informative because I also taught public speaking to undergrads. I started a parallel business to my acting career in 2007 when I graduated from UC San Diego in La Jolla. But then I think prior to going in high school, like I got rid of styrofoam in the high school cafeteria. Like I started the environmental club. I interned on Capitol Hill. I've always been interested, and I was holding signs in Miami, Florida, as Cuban American that said pro-choice, pro-Clinton. So clearly, you know my politics. Again, I say that because inherently who I am is political. So to not be political or to be apolitical comes with immense privilege. If you and your body and your personhood is on the front line of legislation that is looking to limit your freedoms, then I have no choice but to name it and say it. So I know where I feel safe. So I went to a Jesuit prep school in Miami. There's this beautiful kind of motto for the Jesuits, which is being men and women for others. But it wasn't until later, I think in 2018, that I discovered the term tikkun olam, which is to repair the world, which is a Hebrew term. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, that is really what my life's kind of mission and alignment is around, that I am in some ways repairing the wound of Sammy the Seal.
Yeah.
And now I get to work with people who are poised to make a big difference in the world and help them heal and elevate how they show up authentically, vulnerably, powerfully to speak about what's important to them in service of their communities, in service of their audiences. So what happened with my acting career was like, I thought that my acting career was going to be that source of repair, that I was going to be doing these plays or these musicals or these movies or TV shows that were going to be in the repair of the world. And I was like, this third production of My Fair Lady is not doing that. And I love being an actor. It was so much fun. It was, again, playful and liberating, but it wasn't the alignment of my gifts and skills and abilities to show up in the highest good and the highest form of service. And I think the acting career was a step for me to take and apply all of that learning into what I have the privilege of doing now, which is being a public speaking coach and a story doula, as I said before. So now I get to leverage all that work, as I said before, in service of people who are out in the world doing extraordinary things. And what's beautiful is that I'm constantly in relationship to people with profound experience and expertise. So I'm also always learning. So that also feels really rich and really alive. The truth is, being an actor is entrepreneurial, and it's been a side hustle basically since 2007. So I've had a long time in the reps of this work.
Yeah. Thinking of musical theater, and in the deepest, sincerest way, if you look at your story arc, it's almost a beautiful theatrical production in and of itself, just where it starts and the joy of singing and dancing at a young age, and all of the other things that you've described, the pain, the shame, the guilt, the acting to play a role that wasn't authentic, ultimately leading you to a place where you are aligning all of your lived experience in service of other people and bringing their authentic stories to the world in powerful ways. You actually, in my mind, couldn't write a better script.
Thank you. And if it were to end, it's been an amazing ride. It continues to be an amazing ride. But what's interesting is it's been courageous from the beginning. And there's a reason why my business is called Fearless, right? Because you can't get rid of fear. Fear is, we have 5 main emotions as human beings: anger, sadness, shame, fear, and joy. And there are lots of other ones that are nuances of that, but I would say we can simplify and say these are the core emotions that we have as human beings. And I think it's not about eliminating fear, but building a powerful relationship with it, and allowing it to be our teacher. And so it's not about fear gone or fear done or fear without. It's about fearing less.
Yeah.
It is
beautiful.
Less. And that, I think, is powerful, right? Because fear can also be an amazing teacher. There are sometimes where fear is a necessary and very valid emotion to be feeling. Listen to it and be attuned to it.
Yeah. What's the lesson? What's it trying to tell me?
What's it trying to tell me? And there's rational fear and there's irrational fear. The only challenge is the body doesn't know the difference between rational fear and irrational fear.
Yeah.
So and I continue to be in the healing of that. I continue to be in the bigger the platform, the bigger the opportunity, the bigger the experience. Entrepreneurship is definitely a journey in fearing less, because an idea, and now people buy it and believe in you, and you have to continue to provide, and you have to keep on getting better, and you mess up and you make mistakes and you fall on your face and you own up to it and you apologize and you do better. Going back to college again, which is something that we shared, I think that coming out at 18 for me was an act of courage. I mean, it's inherently an act of courage, the act of coming out. But what it also did is it exploded any future of what my life was supposed to look like. There are many people who, even if they come out, don't have that experience. But what I did have was, my life doesn't necessarily have to look like getting married and having 3 kids and going to law school. I can do whatever the hell I want.
Yeah.
And that freedom, I was then in a 70s a cappella group called the Pensions. My outfit for that was a 2-piece pink and white leisure suit with 5-inch platform heels. And I sang Fame. And this was in 1997. Again, before Will and Grace, before gender expansiveness, before non-binariness. There I was gender fucking on college campuses. And what was so interesting is that in that, and it's not like we were performing at Oral Roberts or like some major conservative institution, but we were like SUNY Binghamton and Johns Hopkins and other Ivy League schools and Duke. And people were inherently just like, that's awesome. There is, again, a healing in that authenticity piece. I would say I kind of over-indexed on that femininity piece that I had been hiding and fighting and resisting. I was like, honey, this queen is coming out. And then there's been a recalibration over time. There's something about the courage, the continued courage to be you, which is something that we continue to have to fight for and be in relationship to, because that doesn't go away.
Yeah. And I think when you fully embody it, people sense the owning and the courage of it and respond to that as well. So that's beautiful. So this next segment is called It's My Podcast, so there will be music.
Yes.
And just want to know if there were a song you could put in a time capsule for all time and preserve for future generations, what would it be and why?
Kiss today goodbye, the sweetness and the sorrow. Wish me luck the same to you, but I can't regret what I did for love. What I did for love, gone. Love is, so chorus line. So what I did for love, that was the one that came to me. There were probably others that were more maybe on the front of my brain. But when you asked that question in this moment, that's the song that came up. And I love that moment. I loved a chorus line as a musical as a kid because it was like the lives of the people who are oftentimes invisible, which are the people who don't have a story, which are the people in the background, the chorus in the show, not the lead, not the principal. But I would say that has been my aspiration in my life. I have done everything that I've done for love. It's interesting that the wanting to be in the expression of love is also a medicine for someone who felt that they were inherently unlovable. My wish and my prayer for myself is that I age, my heart only continues to expand and doesn't contract. May I be capable for more love. May my heart hold more. Right. Yep. And I think of this to be specific about our gender expansive and trans siblings who, again, are on the front lines of so much. I think that for myself as a gay man, I know the difficulty and the challenges that I had to reconcile my identities in a world that didn't fit for me. And within that, on that sliding scale, again, of opportunities, the way for my non-binary and trans siblings, how much more complicated and nuanced that is. And I think when we're dealing with things that we don't know or don't understand, sometimes fear pops up, and with fear comes resistance or a separation or a not that. There was a moment I was actually in Israel facilitating something, and there were actually two people that I met that identify as as asexual. And I'd never met the A in the LGBTQIA plus thing. And I was like, siblings, how wonderful. Congratulations. And I think it's interesting that sometimes with deep hurt, oftentimes there's a closing, and may we from our hurt be more open, more receiving of, more loving. And I think that's a revolution. My anger or my rage is sometimes necessary, but my heart and my joy, my love, that's the revolution.
Yeah, it's like alchemy. You can take the one and just transform it into the other. Yeah. And it's beautiful when you or anyone is able to do that. Yeah. And can you sing to me all day, every day?
Sure. Yeah, that's my showtune-itis. That's my showtune-itis. And I think that's the wish for the people who are listening. However you find your heart in this moment, it's a muscle. May we stretch it. In whatever we can today, is there room for the extra elongation? Can the muscle expand just a little bit more? Can my heart open its capacity for greater love?
I feel that when you say it. So it's a beautiful wish. I'd like to echo it, but thank you for saying it so beautifully.
You're welcome.
So as we're wrapping up, where can people find you? What do you want them to know about what you're doing in the world right now?
So the easiest is LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a really great place to get me. So Eduardo Placer, I'm sure people can find the link to me there. If there's something that inspired and moved you about this conversation, please feel free to write me a little note. I would love to hear it, and we'll definitely respond. The other way is going to our website, www.fearlesscommunicators.com. We hold monthly gatherings for human beings to gather in relationship to storytelling and public speaking. You've been a guest at one of our events. It's the first Thursday of every month. It's at noon Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time, and an invitation to join us. So the easiest way to do that is to come to our website, get on our mailing list. We have a free resource, 10 simple backstage tips to go from a speaker to a star. Yes, let us be your Jiminy Cricket on your little shoulder, saying you're amazing, you're awesome, you're extraordinary, being your hype person. And we would love to have you join us in our space so that you can find greater comfort and greater confidence and greater clarity in how it is that you communicate in service of the things that are most important to you in this life.
Yes, I did attend one so far, many more to come, and I would definitely encourage people to gift themselves that time with you and your team. It's really amazing. I want to thank you so much for being here today. I can't tell you how much I have enjoyed getting to know you and having you here today and sharing your story and the inspiration behind it. So I appreciate you deeply. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, everyone. That brings this episode of Stories We Haven't Shared to a close. I believe stories are our humanity waiting to be shared, and listening makes it possible. Thanks so much for being here by our virtual campfire. Until next time, and thank you so much again to Eduardo.
Bye.
Bye.